Off the coast of Australia, a blurry video of an enormous shark goes viral. Off the coast of New England, two boaters report a fin the size of a doorway, and across the internet, the same question keeps surfacing over and over. Could the Megalodon, the largest shark that ever lived, still be out there, somewhere in the deep? Science settled this a long time ago. The Megalodon has been extinct for more than 3 million years. At least that is what the textbooks tell us. But here is what keeps the question alive. We have explored only a tiny fraction of the deep ocean in any real detail. This animal ruled every sea on the planet for nearly 19 million years. And brand new research published just last year suggests it was even bigger and far stranger than the monster you have seen in the movies. So over the next 20 minutes, let us do something different. Let us take the strongest arguments that the Megalodon is still alive, the dredged-up teeth, the unexplored trenches, the fish that came back from the dead, and hold each one up against the real evidence. And let us find out what is actually down there. Before we can ask whether the Megalodon could still be alive, we have to answer a stranger question first. What exactly was it? Because almost everything you think you know about this creature, the way it looked, what it was related to, even how big it got, has changed in just the last few years. And to understand why the survival theories fall apart, you first have to meet the real Megalodon, not the one Hollywood built, the one the fossils actually describe. And that story begins with a problem. We have almost nothing of this animal left to study. Sharks are not built to become fossils. Their skeletons are not made of bone, but of cartilage, the same soft, flexible material in your nose and your ears. And cartilage almost never survives in the rock, so when the Megalodon vanished more than 3 million years ago, it left behind almost nothing of itself. Almost nothing except its teeth, and the teeth are extraordinary. A Megalodon carried hundreds of them at once, arranged in rows, and replaced them constantly all through its life. Across a single lifetime, one animal could shed something like 40,000 teeth. Over 19 million years, the floor of the world's oceans became carpeted with them, triangular, finely serrated like a steak knife, and some of them as long as 7 inches from tip to root. Picture a single tooth the size of your hand. Those teeth have turned up on every continent on Earth except Antarctica. This was not a predator that ruled one corner of one ocean. It ruled all of them. So when scientists first formally described the Megalodon back in the 1830s, they did the obvious thing. They looked at those huge triangular teeth, compared them to the only living thing that looked similar, the great white shark, and concluded that the Megalodon must have been a great white, just scaled up into a monster. For nearly 2 centuries, that was the picture. But the version you have grown up with is not the full picture. And those famous teeth were hiding more than one surprise. Start with what the Megalodon actually was. For generations, it was filed right next to the great white. Same family, close cousins, with the great white treated almost like its smaller descendant. Then, in the early 2000s, researchers studied the fine structure of the teeth more closely. The serrations did not match. The great whites are coarse and uneven. The Megalodons are far finer and more regular. There was no real overlap at all. By around 2019, the Megalodon had been moved into its own separate, extinct family. The two animals, it turned out, are about as closely related as you are to a lemur. The great white was never a baby Megalodon. It was a completely different beast. Then there is the shape. Nearly every museum model and movie monster shows the Megalodon as a thick, tank-like great white blown up to enormous size. But in 2025, a team of 28 scientists led by the paleobiologist Kenshu Shimada studied the most complete Megalodon spine ever found and ran the numbers. The bulky, great white shape simply did not fit. The real Megalodon was almost certainly sleeker and more streamlined, closer in build to a slender lemon shark, with a long body made for cruising the open ocean. And that changed the size, working from a giant section of fossilized backbone, and then from a single vertebra 9 inches across. The team calculated that the largest Megalodons may have reached around 80 feet from nose to tail. And no, that is not a misprint. 80 feet. more than 3 times the length of the biggest great white ever measured and creeping up toward the length of a blue whale. According to that research, we had been underestimating this animal the entire time. So that is the creature we are really asking about. Not a big shark, one of the largest predators that has ever existed on this planet. And the way it lived only makes the survival question harder. Take the bite. Scientists estimate the megalodon's jaws could clamp down with a force somewhere between 24,000 and 40,000 pounds. To put that in perspective, the Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the hardest biters in the history of life on land, came in at around 13,000. The megalodon may have roughly tripled that. It did not just crunch through bone, it bit clean through whales. And it had to, because an animal that size cannot live on snacks. Researchers estimate that a fully grown megalodon needed something like 2,500 pounds of food every single day. That is the weight of a small car, eaten daily just to stay alive. Its menu was whales, dolphins, large fish, and sea turtles, anything big enough to be worth the chase. Even the way it came into the world is staggering. The fossils suggest the megalodon gave birth to live young, and that the newborns were already 12 to 13 feet long. A baby megalodon was roughly the size of a fully grown great white shark, and to reach that size inside the mother, the strongest embryos almost certainly fed on the unhatched eggs around them, a brutal head start that began before they were even born. These pups entered the ocean as apex predators from day one, teeth already sharp, body already enormous, an entire planet of prey ahead of them. So that is the real question. Could an 80-foot predator, one that needed a small car's worth of meat every day and ruled every ocean on Earth, simply slip away unnoticed and survive in secret all the way to the present? To answer that, we have to look at what people point to as proof. If you are enjoying this, take a moment to subscribe. We dig into the real science behind the ocean's biggest mysteries every week, and there is a lot more on the way. Now let us look at the so-called evidence. So we know what the megalodon was. The real question is whether anything that enormous could vanish without a trace, and the people who believe it survived have a list of moments that seem, at first glance, hard to explain. Start with the most famous one. In 2013, a television documentary aired that shook millions of viewers. It showed a dead whale washed up off Hawaii, apparently torn apart by something gigantic, and a scientist on camera explaining that only a creature the size of a megalodon could have done it. There was grainy footage of an enormous fin slicing through the water. People believed every second of it. What most of them missed was the disclaimer at the very start of the program. None of it was real. The footage was staged, the photographs were faked, and the scientists on screen were paid actors. Every last one of them. It was entertainment dressed up as fact, and it fooled the world. Then there are the eyewitnesses. Back in 1918, fishermen off the coast of Australia swore they had seen a pale, ghostly shark longer than 100 feet making off with their lobster traps. As recently as 2022, a news station near Boston ran a story about 2 megalodon sightings off New England. That one turned out to be a basking shark, a harmless giant that cruises along with its huge mouth open, gulping tiny plankton. The viral clip from Australia was almost certainly nothing unusual either. Believers often point to the giant squid. For centuries, it was dismissed as a sailor's legend, a sea monster too huge to be real. And then, at last, we actually filmed one alive. So if the giant squid could hide from us for that long, why not the megalodon? But that comparison falls apart on one detail. The giant squid was never truly invisible. It left a trail. Its bodies washed up on beaches. Its remains turned up tangled in fishing nets. The round scars of its suckers were found marking the skin of sperm whales long before anyone ever caught one on film. There was always evidence. The megalodon has left no such trail. No fresh teeth, no bite marks on modern whales, no beached carcasses, and no credible footage anywhere. Nothing at all. So if it did survive, it would have to be hiding somewhere we almost never look. And there is one theory that is harder to wave away than all the rest. It points to the deepest, darkest, least visited place on the entire surface of the Earth, the Mariana Trench. At its lowest point, the trench drops almost 7 miles into permanent blackness, freezing cold and crushing pressure. More people have walked on the surface of the moon than have reached the bottom of it. We have explored only the tiniest sliver of the deep-sea floor, and that is what makes the theory so seductive. For all our satellites and all our technology, most of our own planet is still a mystery to us. And then there is a genuinely strange piece of history. The very same expedition that first discovered the Mariana Trench, the voyage of the survey ship HMS Challenger in the 1870s, also dredged something else up out of the deep Pacific: Megalodon teeth. And what comes next is the part that still does not quite add up. When those teeth were later examined, one crude method of dating them produced a shocking result. It suggested that some of them were only 11,000 to 24,000 years old. In geological terms, that is practically this morning. The Megalodon was supposed to have died out more than 3 million years ago. So how could there be teeth on the seafloor that looked almost new? It is exactly the kind of detail that keeps a legend alive. What if the Megalodon never really disappeared? What if it simply retreated down into a darkness we could not follow, and is still down there right now in water no human eye has ever seen? It is a haunting idea, and with so little of the deep ocean explored, you cannot disprove it with total certainty. But when you actually hold it up against the evidence, the theory begins to come apart in your hands. Start with food. We have already seen that a grown megalodon needed roughly the weight of a small car in meat every single day. Now think about where it would supposedly be hiding. The deep ocean is one of the most food-poor places on the entire planet. There is almost nothing down there to eat. The deepest fish ever recorded, a small pale snailfish, has only ever been found down to about 27,000 feet, and the reason is simple. Below that, there is not enough food to keep even a small fish alive, let alone a 60-ton predator that eats a car's weight of flesh a day. The deep trench could not feed a megalodon for a week. Then there is the animal's own body. Everything we know says the megalodon was built for warm, shallow, sunlit water. It raised its young in coastal nurseries near the surface, and it hunted in the bright upper layers of the sea where the whales were. The cold, black, high-pressure deep was never its home. Asking a megalodon to live at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is like asking a lion to live at the bottom of a cave, in total darkness, with nothing to hunt. And those strangely young teeth from HMS Challenger? The real answer is far less thrilling. The teeth were not fresh at all. They had been lying on the seafloor for ages, slowly sealed inside a thick crust of a mineral called manganese, which built up around them and dramatically slowed their decay. That crude old dating method was really just measuring the crust and getting it badly wrong. The teeth were not recent, they were simply remarkably well protected. And no, I am not making that up. It is one of the most common ways an ancient fossil gets mistaken for a young one. So the real question is not whether the deep ocean could hide a megalodon. The real question is whether the evidence actually supports it. And on every measurable point, the food, the body, the habitat, the teeth, the answer keeps coming back the same. It does not. But there is one last argument, and it is the strongest of them all, and it has nothing to do with the Mariana Trench. In 1938, a museum curator in South Africa named Marjorie Courtney Latimer was looking through a local fisherman's catch when she spotted something that should have been impossible. A large steel blue fish with thick, fleshy, almost limb-like fins, unlike anything she had ever seen. Scientists identified it as a coelacanth, a fish that was believed to have gone extinct alongside the dinosaurs more than 60 million years ago. It had been quietly living in the deep ocean, completely undetected, the entire time. It is the perfect comeback story. If a creature thought dead for 60 million years could turn up alive in a fishing net, then who are we to say the megalodon is truly gone? The answer comes down to one simple thing. The coelacanth could hide, the megalodon could not. A coelacanth is about 6 feet long and lives quietly in deep, dark water, eating small fish, leaving almost no trace of itself behind. The megalodon was 80 feet long, needed the weight of a small car and food every day, and hunted in the shallow, sunlit coastal waters where human beings have been sailing, swimming, and fishing for thousands of years. A living coelacanth was easy to overlook. A living megalodon would not be hard to find. It would be impossible to miss. We would see the bite marks on the whales. We would find the bodies on the beaches. We would have 1,000 photographs by now. The coelacanth hid because it was small enough to hide. The megalodon never had that option. So if the megalodon is gone and the evidence says it is, then what actually killed the most powerful shark that ever lived? For a long time, the easy answer was simply the cold. As the planet slid toward the ice ages, the oceans cooled, and the story went that the megalodon just could not cope. But science has moved past that. The megalodon was very likely warm-blooded, able to hold its body temperature well above the water around it. It had already survived for 19 million years in seas ranging from the tropics to chilly northern waters. The cold, on its own, did not finish it. What finished it was everything going wrong at the same time. Around 3 to 5 million years ago, the ocean's food web began to collapse beneath it. In a wave of extinction during the Pliocene, more than a third of all the large animals in the sea disappeared. Over half of the marine mammals, almost half of the sea turtles. The whales and dolphins that the megalodon depended on to fuel its enormous appetite were vanishing, and the shallow coastal nurseries where it raised its young were being reshaped as sea levels rose and fell. And into that shrinking, hungry, competitive ocean stepped a new rival, the great white shark. Smaller, leaner, and needing only a fraction of the food, the great white was built for exactly the lean, crowded world that was slowly starving the megalodon out. And this is the cruel twist. The megalodon's size, the very thing that made it the undisputed king of every ocean, became the thing that doomed it. When food ran short, being a 60-ton giant stopped being an advantage. It became a liability. The largest predator the seas had ever known was undone by something far smaller and far more efficient. There is even a strange echo left behind. With the megalodon gone, the whales it once hunted were finally free to grow. The blue whale, the largest animal that has ever lived on this planet, may owe part of its very existence to the disappearance of the monster that once fed on its ancestors. So, could a megalodon still be alive in the deep? When you line up the real evidence, the answer is no. It is not hiding in the Mariana Trench. It could not feed itself down there. It was never built for the deep, and an 80-foot predator hunting along our coastlines would be impossible to miss. The megalodon died out around 3.5 million years ago, brought down by a changing ocean and a smaller, hungrier rival. And yet, after nearly 2 centuries of study, after thousands upon thousands of fossilized teeth, after all the research and all the careful reconstructions, there is one thing we have never found: a complete megalodon skeleton, not a single one. Everything we know about the largest shark that ever lived is built from teeth, a handful of vertebrae, and careful guesswork. One of the most formidable predators in the history of the planet, and it never once left us a body. In that strange way, the megalodon has never fully surfaced. The mystery has not ended. It has only changed shape. If this has you wondering what else might be waiting in the dark, take a look at our journey to the bottom of the Mariana Trench and stay with us. The deep ocean is a very long way from finished giving up its